Hi, welcome to your local camera shop.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good. What brings you in today?
See, I got this camera from a friend. Seems really cool. I know nothing about it, but I need to get my very first lens for it.
Okay, we have lots of lenses. Did you need help choosing one?
No, I think I got it. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by its, let's do this one right here.
Okay, so that's a 16 to 35, so that'll be about $2,000.
Will you do $42 in a fishing license?
Look, there is an overwhelming number of options for lenses, and I don't know if you know this, but they say that there is more combination of deck of cards than there are stars in the sky. Now, would you believe me if I told you there's just as many options for photographers? Well, you shouldn't, because it's not true. That being said, there is a lot of choices, and it is overwhelming, and a lot of them are expensive, and it's easy to make a mistake, so let me walk you through it. So what lens should you get? Grand reveal, drum roll please. You should get a 50mm prime lens, preferably with a fast aperture. Wait. I know I'm not even remotely the first person to say that, but before you go, let me explain why the way your parents never did.
Use your freaking blinker, man.
Dad, can we get ice cream?
No,
Why?
because I said so.
I hate you!
I do not care what brand you get. Your camera brand of choice probably even makes one, but there is some third-party options as well. If you're looking at a 50mm prime lens, there is for almost all choices, a pretty budget-friendly option. Look, I know you're just starting to get interested in photography, and photography has some stupid, convoluted things, especially on the gear side, so something as simple as just wanting to buy a lens is convoluted, so please bear with me while I try to explain this. A lot of the standardizations for photography were made back when film was popular, and the most popular film choice was 35mm film, which, if you were to convert that to the digital world, would be a full-frame sensor. Full-frame sensors are quite popular, but more on the professional side of things. If you own a camera, if you're just starting to own a camera or considering purchasing one, there is a very strong chance that what you're looking at or currently own is what is actually called a crop sensor, an APS-C. It could be a micro four thirds, and there's a very, very, very slight chance you might even own a full frame camera or a medium format camera. The best thing to do before you go out and buy a lens is to look at what your camera's crop factor is. Essentially, just Google your camera body and its crop factor, and if it's ×1, you own a full frame camera. Congratulations. If not, still good. Just take whatever it is. If it's a Canon, it might be a 1.6. If it's a Nikon or a Sony, it might be a 1.5. And you just multiply that by the millimeters of the lens, and that will actually give you what is called a full frame equivalent. That's the same FOV. So everything is just standardized around full frame, and you actually have to convert everything to that full frame. I know it's super stupid, it's super convoluted, but that's what you need to do. So if you have a crop sensor, which is very likely, you're probably actually looking more at a 28 to a 35mm lens to get what is a 50mm equivalent or the same FOV that I'm trying to recommend to you here. That being said, another caveat, this is not for the photographer who's like, all I care about is shooting bears in the woods, or I want to go shoot F1, or I just want to shoot astrophotography. This is a recommendation for someone who is very generically into photography. They want to smell the flowers. They want to walk through all walks of life of photography. They want to try it all. They want to see what speaks to them. Like clay ready to be molded. If you like so much potential, like a baby. If you're just a baby with a camera, this is for you. Now that I've told you all the caveats, all the stupid math, all the convoluted photography stuff, let me actually tell you why this is a great lens choice. And first up is, if you are just getting into photography, without a doubt, there's no getting around it, you are learning photography. And one of the worst things you can do is start by forming really bad habits. One of the most common things you'll see beginning photographers do is to recomposition their photos by just sliding the zoom lens. Zoom lenses are great for a lot of variety in a lens, but it is a much better practice to get used to reframing your photos by moving your feet. And if you can't zoom your lens, you essentially are locking yourself into having to move your feet, which will build that habit from the beginning. And then when you get a zoom lens, you're not being lazy, you're doing it the right way from the beginning. Look, you may or may not know this, but every time you take photos, whether it's on a phone or on a professional camera, there is a variety of settings that are being set each time it takes a photo. And depending on the situation you're in, certain settings will take priority over certain photos. So, if you're shooting sports, it's more important to have a high shutter speed, whereas, maybe the ISO, you can pump that high where it creates more noise. Not to get too complicated, but your focal length is one of those settings. And this lens I'm recommending to you is what is considered a prime lens, which means it doesn't zoom, it's locked in. You're locking in one of your settings at what I would consider a great focal length for most things. And it just lets you, if you're just learning photography, I promise you're going to have enough on your plate trying to figure out full manual. And taking one thing off your plate and just putting it in an automatically good position will let you focus on learning those other settings, and then you can greater appreciate focal length when you get another lens. And 50 millimeters is a great reason to lock yourself in at for a number of reasons. And the biggest one is that, so look, I'm a part-time scientist, accredited mostly by Google and ChatGPT, but the human peripheral, like your full peripheral all the way out to the edges, is they roughly consider it 22 millimeters, which would be a quite wide angle lens. Whereas 50 millimeters is considered to be kind of like your zoomed in focus, like where your vision is sharp. That is generally considered to be around the 50 millimeter range, give or take. It's not exact. But the reason this is important is you should think of 50 millimeters as a net neutral as far as distortion goes. So if you have a 50 millimeter lens, you should be seeing virtually no distortion whatsoever. And it makes it easier for you as a photographer to develop your photo eye, because what you see is what you get. What you see in front of you is essentially what you're going to get a photo of. So it just teaches you how to position yourself properly. And the reason I say 50 millimeters is more of a distortion baseline is as you come down from 50 millimeters and as you go up from 50 millimeters, you'll see different types of distortion. So if you go wider, you're going to see what is called a fisheye effect. It's really popular with like skateboarding videos and, sports like that. If you can get into the thick of things, it's incredible. But it does weird things like make far away things look really far away, and it makes stuff wrap around the edges kind of weird. It can sometimes be a little bit to learn how to manipulate. And on the other end of things, if you go to zoom, if you get what is called compression. And people do really cool things with this, where that's how you get the photos where like the moon looks really huge, because essentially it's taking your depth of field and compressing it. So you'll get, objects in the foreground, in the background, and in the narrow, they're all going to get big and flat. And again, this is great for like wildlife photos or photos of the moon. But get into that later, because if you learn base neutral, you're just going to have a good baseline to understand these distortions as you walk away from it, if that makes sense. Another huge benefit of getting a 50 millimeter prime lens is most of them on the market are going to have what is considered a fast aperture. This would be probably like an f2.2 or less, give or take. Less is not always more, but that is considered a faster aperture. And what that essentially does is it does two things. It makes your camera perform significantly better in low light, because it's that lens opening up way more, allowing way more light in. And it's also going to create a much more dramatic depth of field effect, also known as bokeh. It's going to allow you to master that, setting more as far as aperture is concerned. Like if you're shooting at 1.8 all the way to f11 or f16, it's way more dramatic and way more noticeable for you to get a feeling for what apertures you like for what photos. Whereas if you get a kit lens, it might be like an f5 all the way to an f22. And that's great, but it just might not be as noticeable as far as, learning is concerned. And this is my last pro. Not really, there's one more actually, but this is a pro that I think is kind of a quasi-pro, because it's more a pro of the situation and less of what it is. And that is that there's nothing more intimidating than a blank canvas. A 50 millimeter lens is exactly what it is, and it is nothing else. And limitation is actually one of the best things as far as creativity is concerned. It lets you do things that no one else can do. And locking yourself in, especially if you're just starting photography, is going to get that creative brain working and just going in full force. Where if, let's say you're, in a national park, you're at Rocky Mountain, and everyone's taking a photo of this bear, and they have these zoom lenses, and they're getting these really tight photos that fill the bear in the full frame, and you just don't have the ability to do that, you might get a very interesting and unique photo where you get the bear in his landscape, and you get everything. And it's just limitation can actually just be a great thing for being creative and doing things that no one else does and making it your own. So it's good to get that started early in your photography journey. And this is generally my final point, and this is, photography in practice, which is if you are not a photographer, you've never owned a camera before, you're not used to taking a camera with you places, but if you're serious about photography, the most important thing you can do is take your camera with you as many places as you can. If you want to go to the skate park, bring your camera with you. If you're going downtown, take your camera with you. If you're just on your workday commute and you go through whatever, it's cool. Just take your camera with you. That's the most important thing. And these prime lenses, especially the budget-friendly ones, they tend to be way more on the compact side, which just it makes it way more palatable than carrying around like a 12-pound huge. It's gonna fit into your life significantly better. You can fit it in a purse. You can get a small sling. It's just better in that fact to get used to bringing your camera with you places. And that, again, I cannot stress it enough. That is the most important thing about photography, is actually bringing your camera with you. And the final kind of semi-quasi point is, if you don't know that you love photography, another good benefit is that it's better to spend less money than more money. You should not be spending $7,000 on your first camera setup. If you don't know that you like this and you decide a year later, carrying a camera around with me just isn't my thing, it's better to be out less money. The resale on cameras tends to be pretty good, but it's just better to dabble than it is to be like, I need a professional setup immediately. And the second thing to consider is, if you do love this, this is not your forever lens. This is like ordering cheese pizza the first time you give your baby pizza. It's just very basic. It lets them know what it's about. And it's a situation where it's going to very quickly tell you what you do and don't want. If you're out there shooting photos and it's like a lot of wildlife and you're like, you know what, I should probably get a zoom lens. I'm always wishing I could just zoom a little further. Or if you go to the skate park and you're shooting these photos and you're like, God, I want to get the whole park in there. Yeah, get a wider lens. Or if what you really should also be doing is looking at photographers' work, and if you're like, God, I love the way this guy does this, it's not too hard to guesstimate what lens range he's shooting with and to buy something likewise. This is not your forever lens. It's just a good starting point. And the other thing is that there's no wrong answers. Look, if you already own camera gear that's different than this, or you are just really know you want something else, please, by any means, go do it. The most important thing, if you own photography gear, is to go shoot photos. A moment of silence for all the camera gear rotting away in someone's house. That being said, I'd actually love to check out your work. If there's any way you can share like your Instagram, your website, whatever, I will go check it out to the best of my ability. And I have my own website. Go check that out if you want to see my photos. If you like my videos, I'm going to try and make more. I will make more. Like, subscribe, check out my other stuff. And thank you for checking this out. Hope you have a great day. Bye.